Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki. Welcome to the 570th Imagine Greater Buffalo program and our 191st YouTube Imagine program hosted by our wonderful downtown Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thanks for joining us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. If you have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation as time allows. We are recording this program so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and YouTube channels. And please, we hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speaker. Joining us today is Monica Pellegrino Faix, the executive director of the Buffalo Central Terminal. At one time, the terminal was a large train station in Buffalo's Broadway-Fillmore neighborhood, first opened almost 100 years ago and designed to serve 200 trains and 10,000 passengers daily. Prior to joining the Central Terminal Restoration Corporation, Monica served for more than 10 years on the Richardson Olmsted campus transformation, including 6 years as Richardson Center Corporation's executive director. Monica is an urban planner with a background in social work. She holds a master's of urban planning from the University at Buffalo School of Architecture and Planning. Originally from Niagara Falls, Monica returned to Western New York after living in Alaska for a few years, where she worked in city planning for the city of Nome on the Bering Sea. It's a great pleasure to welcome back to the program in her new capacity, relatively new capacity at the Central Terminal, Monica Pellegrino Faix. Monica, take it away.
Thank you, Dennis, for having me here to talk about the strong future of the Buffalo Central Terminal. On behalf of our board and directors and our staff and our volunteers and neighbors, I'm excited to talk about what we're doing at the terminal and how we're building momentum together as a cultural and economic hub of activity. During the time I was at the Richardson Olmsted campus, I always admired the love for the terminal and the affection that people have for it, and was honored to join the team of supporters that has been working for 30 plus years to breathe new life into the living landmark. Before I go too far, I want to recognize at the front of the conversation the generous funding and support of the Regional Revitalization Partnership, East Side Avenues, and the Consortium of New York State and Philanthropic Funding. You're all here today because you know about the Central Terminal. You know that it's a generational investment. It's a very special and unmatched opportunity to transform an iconic landmark into a vibrant cultural and economic hub once again. We are repurposing this extraordinary space that could never be created today. And it's in a place beloved by a city, and we like to think and say admired by a nation. The reuse will build on Buffalo's investments and economic momentum that is happening with our neighbors. This is really the last legacy building in Buffalo that's finally getting the attention it deserves. Restoration will attract private investment and visitors, and it'll be part of changing the trajectory of Buffalo's East Side economy. We also are signifying broader regional growth mindset, and we are leveraging Western New York's past to propel its future. Dennis told you a bit that we had 10,000 people in and out traveling to and from near and far. This is a majestic Art Deco railroad hub and a point of connection, and most importantly, a symbol of Buffalo's pride. But what will the future hold? There's 5 main goals that we have. One is to create welcoming open spaces with activated grounds and year-round use, recreational activities to drive future interests in the building. It will start with an engaging civic commons, and I'll talk a little bit later how that's already started as a year-round venue of events and activities that are centered around the passenger concourse and the public plaza and adjacent grounds. We are connecting to our neighbors. We're a central part of the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood, and we are tying our future to our neighbors and supporting community quality of life in ways that the neighbors identified for us. We are leveraging a dynamic mix of uses so that early phases support future phases, and I'll talk a little bit about how that's advancing. And we're using sustainable systems and practices while respecting the identity of the buildings and grounds. But how did we start? Well, we know that we started with lots of volunteers, including probably some of you who helped to clean the building, stabilize it, keep it standing. And we're forever grateful to all of our volunteers who did participate and continue to show up, some every Saturday, to take care of the building. And then along with that, we created a master plan, which is an in-depth analysis and guide for the property. One thing that was really special about our master plan is how, together with the community, we really conceived of a new future that's rooted in equity, knowledge, and a shared vision. Our master plan has 3 prongs. It has a Broadway Fillmore neighborhood component, and that was created, as I said, with our neighbors. It has a central terminal building and site plan component. What does the building want to be? What is the condition of the building? How do we need to get it to reuse? And development options and financing guidelines. Our data here can show you the numbers of our broad engagement, but the real story here is that we listened genuinely and openly, and we applied this guidance to our master planning process. So how is the reuse happening? Well, one big approach is that we're taking this vast property that you see here and reconnecting it with the neighborhood. I'll come back to this slide in a minute. We are in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood. This is a historic neighborhood. It has was really considered a second downtown in Buffalo, but over the last 50 years, there's been broad economic disinvestment, and that has impacted the neighborhood. And we are part of a new future building together. We have a huge, huge place. The original property was 70 acres, which is now divided into several owners. The not-for-profit that I work for owns 12 acres, and that's the main terminal building with the tower and the passenger concourse that you probably mostly think of, the entry plaza, parking garage, mail and baggage building, and the lawn. The city owns 16 acres, and that includes the post office building and a building outside of this picture, and 16 acres. The redevelopment will be the city property and the not-for-profit property together. So that's 30 acres and 500,000 square feet of building. So how is this all moving from plan to action? There's 3 big parts that I'll tell you about. One is that we used the plan to solicit for a development team. We did a national solicitation for development partners in 2022. We did that with the city of Buffalo, and we used a 2-part process. We started with a request for expression of interest, and then we followed that with a request for proposals. We engaged our community group in the selection, and we were awed by the strong responses. This picture here that you see is us inviting the development teams in for a tour. We had probably about 90 people that day. We selected a 3-part team. It's CB Emmanuel, which is a local group led by Ben Upshaw, who actually grew up not too far from here. The Alexander Company, which is a national company based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and Rise Community Capital. CB Emmanuel has a long history focused on housing, and the Alexander Company and Rise Community Capital are national developers. So this team has been working hard for the better part of a year on the redevelopment. What we really loved about their plan is that they embraced the master plan and the values, and they created a proposal of future uses that included the civic commons for events, entertainment, attainable and affordable housing, that includes rental and home ownership, ideas such as co-working spaces, childcare, light manufacturing, culinary education, makerspace, neighborhood retail businesses, and workforce development. As you can tell, this is a mix of uses. It takes a lot of uses to mix together and create a vital community. We are, as I mentioned, a vast space, and we're part of this larger economic initiative to spur economic growth on the East Side. And that is the mission of the Regional Revitalization Partnership and East Side Avenues, with the philanthropic partners like the Wilson Foundation and state funding through Empire State Development. Another way that we're making it happen is we're using the funding that we have in place now to address safety issues, functional issues about the building, structural issues. We have a really terrific architecture team, Quinn Evans, and they worked on Michigan Central Station. So they helped us assess the building. They said it's in very good shape compared to Michigan Central, but very good shape still means there's a lot of work to do. And we're currently on phase 2 construction. What you see here is a buck hoist elevator going up the side of the tower building, because we will be working on masonry at the top of the tower. We will be working on abatement and cleaning of the tower, and we will be working on the plaza and the concourse parts of it to be able to get people back inside and enjoy and be awed again by the passenger concourse. The third prong of how this is happening is by welcoming in our neighbors and friends to enjoy the Central Terminal through events and programming. This will be our 4th year of outdoor programming. We have a joy-filled time on our lawn with family-friendly events like movies, summer concerts, Fall Fest. We introduced a Bengali event last year that will have a repeat this year. So lots of things to do and come out to. This is our schedule of events that we had last year. Oh, we brought back the car show last year, which basically took over the neighborhood. So we're looking to have that come back this year, and we hope that you can join us. We'll have our 2025 schedule out soon. So that's kind of a big picture of where we're at. I hope you drive by and look at what's happening at the terminal. You'll see the scaffolding up the side. It's really an exciting time to see such major work happening at the Central Terminal. And I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
And I'm sure we have many. So can you give us a rough timetable on the schedule, in the sense of what is real in your mind by the end of this year, by the end of next year, let's say, what's done?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the phase two schedule. So the work that I talked about in the phase two, the abatement and cleaning of the tower, the stabilizing and fixing the masonry and roofs at the top of the tower and the concourse, and reopening the doors to the concourse. That will happen by the end of 2027. So that's huge. That's monumental progress. And it is the start of the stabilization that needs to happen to move forward the reuse.
Good. So that's the foundational project to complete, and that makes total sense. And 27, this would be a good around the corner in some ways.
Yes.
Let's hear if we have some questions, and I'm sure we do.
We do not have any questions from the chat just yet.
Well, come on, Buffalo. There's a lot of folks interested in this building. As you mentioned, volunteers really were the backbone of really even just pushing legislators, foundations to fund something so it wouldn't totally fall into disrepair. And so you have something to work with. So you acknowledge those volunteers, and they're central. And I do imagine some of them, I thought, would have more questions than this.
The volunteers are really special. As I said, we have some volunteers that have been coming every Saturday. And when I say every Saturday, I mean every Saturday for 20 years. We have a young man that started when he was 9 and he still comes to volunteer. It's a really special story. I've asked a few of them, like, why? And they said it feels like home, which I think is a really, really tells a terrific story about the terminal. It feels like home.
Well, your 27 deadline includes next year, obviously, of 2026 and America's 250th anniversary. And when you say 10,000 trains a day going through that, Buffalo certainly, I mean, just that number alone gives you a sense of the relevance of the city 100+ years ago, to be celebrated certainly within America's celebration. Okay, Melissa, you have some questions.
We do. First of all, I think you briefly mentioned it, but are you encouraged by similar projects happening in other cities, such as Detroit's Central Station restoration?
Yeah, definitely. I think we feel buoyed by the projects that happen in this city. And I think that there are complicated redevelopment projects that happened in this city that really opened the door to our imagination that we can do this, and our confidence that we can do it. And we also, we visited Michigan Central. We love that project. It was, as our architect said, in worse shape than ours. So we take a little confidence in that. And we know that these projects in other cities are strong public-private partnerships. And so we take an example from that as well.
How does or does the future of the Central Terminal include trains, such as maybe a museum for trains or something like that?
Oh, it's a good question. We are advancing the development in a way that could include trains. You know, we have started conversations with Amtrak. They own 30 acres of the property, which includes all the former platforms. We just want to make sure we have a good relationship with our neighbors. So we could have trains as part of the redevelopment. We are not, as you can tell in the presentation, we're not leading with trains. So we think that they could come if there's more people and more activity.
And as a lifelong Buffalonian, I feel like I've been hearing about the Central Terminal my entire life. Why is now the right time for this restoration to happen?
Yeah, it's a question that always comes up. So, and I would say that, to be honest, the second part of this question that always comes up is, why is it different now? And I think this is different now, and now is the time because We're part of a broader consortium of focus on the east side. There's been 50+ years of disinvestment. Lots of areas of revitalization have happened on the west side, South Buffalo. So the east side we need to knit the east side with the rest of the city for us to be a strong city. And the really special thing about the central terminal and other projects that are part of this regional revitalization partnership in the East Side Avenues is that it's centered on community and people and what we hear as the guide rather than what we're imposing on other people for redevelopment, so that we can pair both together. The strengthen the economy of our city of the East Side in a way that residents have said they want it to be strengthened.
Someone asked about potentially restaurants or banquet rooms available. Obviously, I don't know if those are in your plans at all, or if you've given any thought to those.
Well, definitely there will be places for lots of sort of catalytic business opportunities that come from having a civic commons event space. There is a former restaurant space that could be ideal for special events, but we don't have an exact, we know that these are elements of the plan, but we don't have the exact tenants yet.
And we'll wrap up with this question. This commenter said they read about the old mailboxes being overseas. Are you trying to reclaim parts of the terminal that were taken?
Well, the lights are overseas and the mailbox is at the Wolfsonian Art Deco Museum in Miami. But the questioner has a good point that there was a point in time that one of the owners sold off a lot of features of the building. They sold off the clock, which has been returned. We at this point are interested in these items, but we don't have a plan to return or retrieve them at this time. Some of the lights were recreated based on measurements, so there is that kind of possibility. But right now we're just excited to find where things are and how we can connect with them.
Great. Dennis, those are all the questions for today.
We've got just a few minutes. We promised you'd for your next appointment would be able to finish up here in a timely fashion. My question is there any access to the top of the tower? Is there an elevator at all that's near working conditions so that it could be something that people could visually see the city from the perspective of the top of that? That might draw more interest in and you know, certainly be an attraction. Just like going to the top of City Hall, most people aren't aware that's something they can do. There's a lookout tower basically up there. And is that possible for your tower?
Right now, the access to the top of the tower is by climbing 16 flights of stairs. The former elevators are not functional, but the stairs do go there. We do have that blocked right now because of asbestos, but as you heard, we're going to be doing that cleanup during the next year. And the views are phenomenal. Out of this world, the views are from the top of the tower.
Very nice. Are they indoor or is there a walk around area on that top level?
They are, it's both. It's both.
It's just a thought, you know, fundraiser type of thing for you to get people in too. If you get those stairs working, there's a few people in Buffalo that might want to go up there and sit and tie it to a fundraiser, you know, that they raise money to help out your cause like that. Just a thought.
I think that's a great idea.
Good, good like that. Well, we are approaching, unless somebody else has got a last question or two. This has been, from my standpoint, and having family members that have often talked about their desire. I have a brother who worked there in the 70s, just before it closed. And I see he's on here listening. So if there's, it's everybody, as you know, the stories of people returning from World War II, the stories handed down through the generations. It holds those stories more than probably any other building in Buffalo. That glory years, when you say the East Side has been disinvested, Buffalo as a whole has been declining population since 1950. So you're talking 75 years already, losing about 1% of its population, much like Detroit, Cleveland, over the same time period, the last 75 years. So this is the last one to get fixed up, if you will, the Martin House, and you alluded to it, our successes, the Martin House, now the Richardson complex, the Lipsey Architecture Museum we read about last week, with some beautiful plans, and you had laid a lot of that foundational work, I'm sure, for that, Monica, when you were there. So it's our cultural organizations. It's frankly why I created the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature. It struck me as our future, as it looks at our past. All of those, all of our major culturals include our past, but they're really pointing to our future to attract those 5 to 6 million folks across the border from Southern Ontario and Toronto, as well as around the world, which I'm seeing from the AKG renovation, especially. I'm a docent there, and I get to see people from literally around the world visiting Buffalo because of that. You will add to that in great measure. So we're going to wish you well, and thank you for this very visionary progress report that you've been able to provide all of us here in Buffalo.
Thank you for inviting me for the update, and I hope you come to our events this summer.
I encourage everybody to consider your support just by going to those events. So thank you for joining us, folks. Hope you'll be back next Tuesday, April 1st, on Zoom, where we'll be joined by a quilting artist. We always look at art and creativity on the first Tuesday, or try to. And this person, he's a retired Hamburg Public Library director. And the folks at the library said, you've got to have Jack Edson. Will be presenting on patterns and portraits in fabric. We're going to see the art in quilting. And I'm sure Jack Edison will have a very, very good program. So join us then. In the meantime, I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.